But yeah, that was my experience. And I got home and met Sean 5 months later.
Where'd you guys meet?
Go ahead.
Strip club.
Yeah, I became a stripper right after my mission.
No. Okay, do you want me to tell it or you can tell it? I talked enough. You can tell it.
Okay.
Actually, okay, let me say one part.
Okay.
I came home from that mission, and my mission, and sorry to take over, but it kind of precludes what she's going to say. I got married, John, right off my mission.
Yeah, we almost forgot that. I almost forgot about that.
So I came home from my mission, and I confessed. And then I had this feeling, the mission president said, you go get married now, and he was a close friend of mine. That's your new mission. Your new mission is to go find a wife. And then I got home, the bishop was saying, it's time to get married. And my parents were, they were obviously, knowing my history, thought there was safety in marriage. And so I got married very, I think I kind of jumped into a marriage.
Well, I mean, sorry to cut off, but
sure.
You were sexually active before your mission. You went 2 years putting that genie in the bottle. You're going to explode when you get back.
Yeah.
So Mary, I mean, this is for everyone, but especially for you, marry as soon as possible or you're going to transgress. That had to have been the messages you received.
Yes.
Not take your time, get to know the person, make sure you're compatible. Make sure you're a good fit for each other. It's like freaking get married before you transgress.
That's right. And I did. In fact, I prayed and prayed and prayed and I asked God who I should marry. And I actually felt that there was this one person that was involved in my life and had written me on my mission, and I thought that I was probably supposed to marry her, so I did, and that only lasted 5 months, and we got it annulled, and she's a great person, and she comes from a great family, and it wasn't a good fit. I went into a great deep, dark depression for about 3 months. I hardly left the house. If I did leave, I brought my dog with me. I was a wreck. John, I always was supposed to be the person that was really good at things. I was the person that got the good grades, and I was the person that, captain of the football team, had Division I college football scholarships. Everything I did, I succeeded on the mission. And when I failed at that marriage, I felt like I really did feel like, for the first time in my life, I felt like an absolute failure. And I actually believed that everyone that knew me was not literally pointing pointing their finger at me and laughing. That's how I felt.
Yeah, there's this saying that I learned from Noah Rasheta in Secular Buddhism podcast that negative labels are lead chains, but positive labels are gold chains. But in the end, both are chains. Yeah, but before your mission, you're feeling worthless because you transgressed, and that's a chain that binds you. But then you're AP on the mission, and you're redeemed and you're forgiven, and now you're a warrior of light. Well, what happens when things go wrong? Yeah. The good labels can be just as much of a chain and a burden as the negative ones.
Yeah, and so then you can tell how we met.
Yeah. Well, how long was it after?
I met you 8 months after I got divorced.
Yeah, so we met actually the first time in high school through my best friend, the one I ended up moving to Arizona with. And
so that's confusing because I just said we met 8 months after my divorce.
Officially,
but we bumped into each other in passing.
I knew of him because my best friend was really good friends with Sean. They were buddies in high school. And so I always heard the name Sean Escobar. We bumped into each other a couple times, but there's not much.
The first time I saw her, this is fun. This makes me happy. On a bright note, I saw her when I was a sophomore in high school, and she was at my friend's house.
You were junior.
A junior, okay. And she was getting in a car with an older boy, maybe like a senior. We were sophomores. And I remember she walked out of the house and I thought, who is that? Like, that girl is gorgeous. And then I remember thinking I should have her best friend. I should have her introduce me. And then I had this thought, she looks like she's with a much older dude, and I don't think I stand a chance. So that never happened.
Yeah, so we never really like got to know each other or hung out. I just knew of him, and they were good. You and Brent, I mean, not to mention names, but
Your best friend, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they kept in touch. My best friend and Sean kept in touch throughout his mission, and then so when I got home from my mission, she's like, we should go visit Sean Escobar, my friend. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And we went over to his house, and he happened to be like on a double date at his house. And
John, I had straightened out my life. I mean, when I say straightened out, I was being good, but I mean, I thought the marriage had failed, and my new motivation was, I'm going to live the gospel perfectly. I'm going to do everything exact, and then God will bless me with a wife that, it's going to work out this next time. And that was all I cared about was finding my wife.
Yeah, so we went to his house, and it was funny that Sean instantly was not paying too much attention to his date.
No. I was on a double date at the house, right?
Yeah.
And I just stopped paying any attention to my date whatsoever. And I like locked in on Crystal. And I was like, so she said, I'm a return missionary. I was like, what? And then she's like, I do network marketing. And then I was like, wait a minute, like I do network marketing. So we had that connection, and it was just unreal. I mean, it got so, my date left. My date that I was with, she just said, hey, looks like you want to catch up with these guys. I'm going to leave. And I was like, okay, sorry. And so we visited for an hour or so, a couple hours.
Yeah.
And then I asked Crystal for her phone number before she left there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, this is about to get pretty crazy, this story.
Then he called me the next morning and asked me out, and I think it was a matter of like 3 dates, which is all within 1 week, that we were like, we are getting married. And 3 months later, we were married.
I looked at Crystal. We were in my parents' basement. It was our 3rd date, and she said, I like you a lot. And I said, I love you. She goes, what? Is that possible? I said, I think so.
Yeah.
Then we started talking about getting married.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think everybody was a little shocked when we're like, yeah, we're getting married. We just started dating like a week ago, but we're engaged. And we're getting married in 3 months, so.
It was one of those storybook movie type love stories.
Yeah.
I knew, John, the minute she walked in my house, I knew she was the girl that I'd bumped into in high school. And I knew right then and there, I'm going to marry this woman. And my best friend happened to be there. He was my best friend at our wedding, and he's since passed on. But after Crystal left, I met back up with him, and he said, you're going to marry that girl. And I said, I know. And it's just how it went.
Crystal, how did you overcome knowing he had been divorced?
That was hard at first. I was not interested in him at first, only because of that.
Oh.
Just that first night.
Damaged goods, right?
Yeah, I was like, there's something wrong with him. I instantly judged him and assumed that there's some issues there.
And there was some issues, like, to be fair, like early on in marriage is hard. And I look back on my first marriage, and I didn't do anything. There was no infidelity. There was no violence, but I was pretty immature, and I was there. I have regrets about that. It wasn't meant to be anyway, but I want to own the fact that I very much played a role in my divorce.
Yeah, but I got over that really quickly because he's so awesome and amazing and handsome, and yeah, we just had that connection instantly, and I just. Yeah, that first night we got together, I was just like, yeah, it didn't bother me anymore knowing that he had been divorced. I just had...
We both had a passion for the gospel at the time. It did draw us together.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really just like everything. My dreams were all coming true. I felt like I'm getting a returned missionary. We're getting married. And this is like so perfect, like the happy ending,
It's what you had served your mission for.
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
what you had activated back in the church for.
Yeah.
Right?
It all came crumbling down.
Yeah. So how'd that happen?
Well, and I do still, I do believe that both of us were supposed to be in the church, and that, if he felt like that was an answer to a prayer, I feel like that was an answer to a prayer. But I also feel like we're on the right path now, and I feel like that it was just part of our evolution, and it's just a stepping stone in our spiritual development. And of course, there's some damaging parts that we've come to find out over the last year working through everything, and we realized some things that really have affected us in a negative way that we didn't see until even more recently.
Right. We've been able to assign a lot of meaning to our experiences. As far as my answer to my prayer around the temple, the tornado, I've been able to assign some meaning to that. I actually do believe that God, I don't think it was just an answer to my prayer. I think there was a whole host of people, not even Mormons, that were praying that day about things, and a tornado came, and I think I was supposed to be Mormon for a time, John.
Sure.
Yeah. That's how we see it.
Sure.
And she wouldn't have been interested in me if I wasn't a returned missionary. And she's my one and only. She's my soulmate. I mean,
it brought us together.
I was meant to find this woman, and I wouldn't have found her otherwise. So
I'm just going to interject one thing. Some people love it when I interject, and some people hate it. But I've been reading an author named Richard Rohr, and he has a book called Falling Upward, and he's a former Franciscan monk in the Catholic Church, and he's one of the world's experts in faith crises and disaffection. He's an advocate for maintaining your Christian faith if you can, and even maintaining affiliation with the church. But he talks about first half of life and second half of life. And he basically makes the argument that the first half of life is meant for you to get a sense of self, to get an ego, to get an education, to get financially stable, to build a community, to build an identity, because you need all of that infrastructure to then go on that quest of your second half of life to figure out who you are and what you want to do and how to make the world a better place and to find meaning and purpose. But he makes the argument that religion is a great infrastructure for you to build up a sense of self and a stable life, so that then you can lose your faith and go on a quest to find deeper and positive meaning. And, I had this sense all along, but Richard Rohr kind of helped me put that into words, that's why I don't hate religion. I don't hate Mormonism. That's why I celebrate people who find happiness and joy in the church, because I really do believe that you guys are perfect examples of how, what would your lives have been if you hadn't have been in the church? Maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been worse. But how could any of us, myself included, deny the value of having an identity, having a morality that keeps you out of trouble, that keeps you safe, that gives you an education, that gives you a community, that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, and that kind of focuses and targets you towards a constructive, healthy trajectory. Yeah. And I think it's not only unhealthy, it's not only inaccurate, but it's unhealthy for us to then just say, well, Mormonism was all bad and all evil and a bad influence on our lives. No, I think Richard Rohr, who's Catholic, not Mormon, would say Mormons do the first half of life better than almost anyone, because it can set you up. Of course, there are examples of abuse and ways that the church really destroys people, but on average, the church sets you up for a really healthy, happy life if things go decently for you.
Mm-hmm.
I have just one. I never liked church, John. From the time my mom used to make me go through even on my mission, I didn't like it. I don't like to put a suit and tie on. I don't like the formality. I don't like the authority. And so I agree with everything you just said. By and large, I do. But I will say there's some misfits. And I was a misfit, and all I did for 20 adult years of my life was wonder what was wrong with me.
Right. Yeah.
But everything else you said, I agree with it. And it taught us good disciplines and good morals and values, like you said, and gave us a good culture. I love Mormon people. They're my people.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, but I'm not going to push back, but I'm just going to say to you, Sean, socioeconomically, you're in the 99th percentile of the world, right? Right now. The Escobars are. And you were as active devout Mormons. And so to what extent can you just say the church had nothing positive to do with the fact that you're among the most fortunate people on the planet right now, right?
I don't know how to, I don't know if I could quantify that,
Well, and I've never been the victim of the abuses that you have, and I didn't have to deal with the self-loathing and the guilt.
Let's
and
put
shame.
it this way:
Yeah.
I know more wildly successful geniuses outside of Mormonism than I do in it.
Of course, because Mormons are a small percentage
That's
of
right.
the population.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm not making the argument that you need to be religious to become a good person.
Yeah, the first half of your life.
But So anyway, thanks for your indulgence. So, but my sense is your courtship was not uncomplicated, that there became some complications in your courtship.
Why would you think that?
Just the little homework that I've done. Because you'd both been sexually active.
Yeah.
And you're madly in love with each other.
Yeah.
That genie had been in the bottle for a couple of years.
Yeah.
You've got some common sense there. Yes. So Crystal and I, we tried so hard to be good and to wait till our wedding day, which was,
Yeah, we couldn't even wait 3 months. So.
we couldn't wait 3 months, and we succumbed to the temptation, I guess we'll call it, and we immediately went in.
Okay, wait, I have a question. So you're both returned missionaries. You're both really into the church. You're both feeling like God is putting you together.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have sex.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind and what emotions do you feel? Forget the bishop, but between the actual sex and the bishop, what goes through your mind after you've fornicated? You know what I mean?
Well, initially I felt really bad and upset. I'd come so far and now I'm messing it all up. But at the same time, I think I was justifying it in my mind. Like, well, I'm in love with him. We're getting married, like, why do I have to feel
I don't
bad
think
about this?
justification is the right word. I think it's confusion. It's confusing.
Yeah, maybe it's just back and forth, like feeling bad, but why do I have to feel bad about this?
It doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel evil, and yet you're taught and told that it's like one of the chastity, breaking the law of chastity is, right up there, and especially when you've been endowed.
Next to murder, right?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I think that we were very conflicted, but we felt really bad, John, and we went and confessed it right away.
Right away. And
So you didn't do the same thing and hide it this time?
Well, there was no need to hide it. We did what we thought was the right thing.
So we confessed, and then so we knew we weren't right away. We knew we weren't able to get married in the temple.
We could have hidden it. We could have hidden it and gone and got married in the temple. We could have done that.
Yeah,
for your mission.
So we knew right away
That's
okay, that's gone out the door. We're not going to get married in the temple. And then at that point, we're like, well, then why would we stop having sex?
Okay, we're being honest.
So we just threw in the towel altogether, I think.
But at the same time, John, we can laugh about it, but every time we'd have sex, we'd feel bad.
Yeah.
It felt good, then we'd feel bad. It was very hard.
And it should. And Natasha Helfer Parker has a great podcast where she tells her own story about falling in love with this young man in high school, having this wonderful, beautiful sexual experience, and how that should have just been a beautiful, healthy, normal, developmental sexual experience. But instead, it gets layered with this incredible guilt and shame that spoils what could have just been something beautiful.
Yeah,
it was humiliating to get. Well, we had to. I had to go through a church council, John. We can talk about that because some things happened in that were very unsettling.
No, we need to talk about it. But whatever you want to talk about.
I don't want
first.
to. Yeah. So
what?
Oh. I think I'm a pretty much an open book at this point in time. But where was I going?
So
we
you had to go through the.
It was humiliating to get married civilly, John. Like her mission president came to our wedding, and it was humiliating to get married civilly. And it was sad. It's really sad because...
Especially all your family's like, oh, these triumphant return missionaries.
Yeah.
You know how we paid for our wedding? Like her family had no money. Her dad didn't contribute not a cent. And my parents, I'm a boy, so they're not supposed to pay for it. But my parents were so generous, and they said, you can have a yard sale with everything we have. and you can keep all the money for your wedding. That's so sweet now that I think about it. It's really awesome. And so we had a 2-day garage sale, and we raised, I think it was $4,000, and that's what paid for the whole wedding was $4,000. And what should have been a really, really fun, exciting, awesome day, there was that. How do you say something hovering over?
Cloud.
Yes.
Yeah, I was a little embarrassed, to see my, people from my
everybody
board
knows.
or my
They all know why
mission
you're getting
president.
married
When they
civilly.
come in, they're like, "Congratulations!" I'm like, "Thank you." So there's a lot of embarrassment and shame having to see them
my
face to face
bishops,
at my wedding.
My past bishops were there.
Yeah.
It's humiliating.
Yeah, and it's so public,
Yeah,
It's just so
like
public.
everybody knows,
Yeah, that's so hard. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. We had to go through a church council. Do you want me to go into that?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Crystal, which I was so grateful that they kind of just gave Crystal a slap on the wrist. I was very happy about that. And me, I probably had a little mark on my record, John, because I'd lied about that going on my mission, and when I came and confessed that, I probably had a mark on my record, and I did have to go through a church council at that time too, and they kind of, they showed me mercy that time.
Right after your mission, you went through a council.
I did.
And you weren't disfellowshipped.
No,
Okay.
they showed me mercy. I think anyway, that none of that really matters why they showed me mercy, but I was grateful. This time I had to go through a church council. This particular stake president was very invasive. He wanted lots of details. I had to meet with him, I want to say it might have been weekly, it might have been every other week, but a lot. And we got married, and I had to meet with him a lot. And he would ask a lot of questions that I think in hindsight were inappropriate. He asked a lot of questions about what we did in the bedroom. Now, what's unfortunate about that is this was not someone like a one-night stand. This was not someone that I wasn't committed to, and this was absolutely consensual, but this was someone that I loved and was engaged to and ultimately married and was committed to. And I was asked a lot of questions about what we did in the bedroom.
Yeah, even after we were married, because I think we went through the council.
Because I
after
still
we
had
were
to
married.
I was in this, this repentance process, and I had to keep meeting with him for like a year, and it got to the point where I was disturbed by the questions he was asking me, and very confused why.
Are you comfortable sharing the questions? Because I think that really brings it home when you.
I'll share one of them. One of the questions was, this was the one that when I finally just said enough is enough. I'm pretty outspoken, and I don't like stuff like that. So
Just to give, for those with no context, give us.
Ultimately, he looked at me and he said, when you're having sex, does your wife ever give you oral sex? And then he wanted me to describe how often and what does that look like? And that's when I finally said, I don't want to talk about this stuff anymore. Like, I'm married now, and if I wasn't married, I'd feel inclined to talk about it. But as far as I'm concerned, what happens in the bedroom behind closed doors is my business. And then I think that pretty much shut him down, and that was the end of those kinds of ridiculous questions. In the council, something happened in the council, John, the disciplinary council or court. Something happened that stuck with me all this time. I went through the whole thing. I was very penitent. I felt horrible about what I'd done, and that I'd done it to Crystal. And I remember we went through the whole council, and there's like 15 men in there, something like that, and 12, 15 men, and they're all going around, and they were being very kind, and they were being very understanding. And then all of a sudden, it was almost over, and I thought, well, I felt like this went well. And then all of a sudden, this one man, he was probably in his 30s. He was young. He was young to be in there. I was only 24 at the time. And he looked at me and he goes, wait, everybody. I've got one question that I want to, before we end this, I've got a question. He looks at me and he looked at me with this stare, like he's trying to look through me or something. And he goes, you're a return missionary. You took out you did the endowment. You took out covenants with your Heavenly Father. Sacred covenants, eternal covenants. And he goes, I just want you to tell us what went through your mind when you took off those sacred emblems, those sacred garments, and put them on the floor. And that's how he said it, John. And I think at that point, I felt like saying, John, I'm glad I get to say it here, because I can be witty. I'm not as witty as a lot of people, but I wouldn't have sworn at him, but I would have looked him in the eyes. What I did say was, well, I wasn't thinking. That's what I said. I wasn't thinking, and nothing really went through my mind. I just did what I did. But what I wanted to say, what actually was in there but didn't come out was, hey, you know exactly what wasn't going through my mind, and you know exactly what was going through my mind, because you're human. And every single one of the men in this room, you all know exactly what happened, because you've all done it to some extent. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, I don't know if everyone... John was a virgin before he got married.
No. Done it to some extent.
Oh.
We've all done things we know we're not supposed to do. Oh. We've all,
He's trying to shame you. He's basically
all those men. Every man in there has looked at pornography. Everyone. I know that. But they're going to look at me and judge me and cast stones. And that was hard for me at that moment. That was really hard for me to tolerate. And I think they disfellowshipped me. And so
what does that mean to someone who's not Mormon?
I couldn't take the sacrament.
Which is a very public shaming act, right?
Yeah.
The whole congregation is, in your mind, watching. And each Sunday as they pass the sacrament, you've got to let it go by. And it's like this big scarlet letter that's branded upon you, right?
Yeah. I couldn't hold a calling, which means I couldn't serve, couldn't pray in public.
And then people say, what's your calling? And you're like... I mean, the different mechanisms the Mormon Church has to heap guilt and shame upon people is profound, you know? Mm-hmm. And just imagine when you're disfellowshipped, hey, Brother Escobar, would you say the prayer today? Oh, I can't say the prayer.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
that's exactly what happens.
And so people are like, well, Sean can't say the prayer.
What did he do?
What did he do wrong? You know,
that's what happens.
And the ironic thing, and I was going to mention this earlier, is that what this breeds in Mormonism is a culture of dishonesty, where the honest people who admit to doing something wrong are punished in a public shaming way. Mm-hmm. And then the other people see that and they're like, well, I'm just going to lie. And so the church, and so those people who do make the mistakes, they don't get the public punishment. But they've been reinforced to lie, and then they have to go through their ward experience living the shame that you lived on your mission, Sean. So it's kind of a lose-lose. The honest people are shamed and humiliated, and then the dishonest people are rewarded, but then reinforced to be dishonest, and then have to live with the shame. It's just it's a shame all cluster around. F. Sean, you're getting emotional. What are you feeling?
I never felt like I was a spiritual one. I would look at all these leaders and I would think, these are the spiritual ones. And I'm the one that's fallen and I don't have the spirit. And I'm always going uphill. I'm always pushing against the grain. I'm the misfit. Even in my adult years, I look at these men and I hate to stereotype, because a lot of Mormon people are good people and a lot of Mormon men are really good people. The majority of Mormon bishops are as good as they come. But there are some pretty hypocritical people at a church level that aspire to callings, and I'm familiar with some of those people.
Well, we're going to get to that when we talk about Sterling, right?
And, yeah, but not just him. I mean, at every level, and I see it, and I sense it, and I pick up on it, and I see what they do in business, and I see how they get into these callings, and I see the politics involved, and yet, my own children. John, it killed me for years. My oldest is 13, and it's killed me for years to think that my daughter will be taught her entire life who is spiritual. And I'm not one of them, John, because I have a mark on my record. John, I'm a very successful person. I've had wild success. And I don't say that to be arrogant or to boast, but God's given me gifts. And I was never valued beyond my mission. I was never valued in the Mormon Church. I spent 10 years in the Scouts. I never had a meaningful calling, or what some people call a meaningful calling. I'm a nobody. I was a nobody. And my children, it killed me, John. Every time we'd go to church, it'd kill me to think my children, they look up at these men, and those are the spiritual men. And what is Dad? What is Dad? That killed me. And it caused the most contention in our marriage, if we're going to get into that, was the church. Because I saw everything that for years, for 10 years, I saw everything that was wrong socially, culturally, administratively with the church. And I would voice it to Crystal, and she would shut me down big time. Because she thought that's what she was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, the humiliation, the public humiliation of the disfellowshipment was this additional blow of just you feeling unworthy and broken and defective. And eventually that leaves a scar. What's ironic, I just have to note something. If the atonement works as we're taught, which is that the scriptures say, white as the snow, as you were scarlet, now you're white as snow. If that's true, what you had done on, prior on your mission and would have not mattered because you had been totally forgiven.
Yeah.
So technically, the fact that you guys both transgressed, after your missions, you're on equal level. So the fact that, Crystal, you got off and were exonerated for the same sexual acts, I'm assuming that he engaged in, that makes no logical sense.
Yeah.
Like, yes, Sean, you're gracious in saying you're glad she was spared that humiliation, and we all are glad that you were spared that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, according to logic, you didn't deserve that any worse than she did. And so yet you're facing it, and now there's this disparity of worthiness. And then because we're in this patriarchy and everything's so arbitrary, you're carrying that scarlet letter of having begun your marriage, something that's supposed to be pure and holy and sacred and beautiful. You're starting off on the foot of unworthiness and shame. And then you're, again, always caught in this worthiness treadmill of always hustling for worthiness, like you said. And this strikes at the heart. And those of you who are still, Orthodox Christians or really believers, I'll have to ask your forgiveness in advance. We all think the story of Jesus is beautiful. We all are inspired by these stories of Christ and compassion and kindness and love and forgiveness. Good on all that. I still am a believer in all those good teachings. There is something fundamentally insidious about the teachings around the need for an atonement. Because what it does is Christianity begins with the assumption that we're all broken.
Born flawed.
Yeah.
We're born broken and flawed. And unintentionally, I'll just say in a charitable mindset, I'm sure religions don't intend to do this, but they want to break you down and make you feel worthless and flawed so that you need them.
Yeah.
You need the religion to then feel worthy. And so they're always got you on this carrot and stick where they're holding you up to these expectations you usually can't possibly live by. Then you feel unworthy. Then they beat you and punish you to make you feel terrible so that then you feel like you need them to be worthy. And it's a sick cycle. And as beautiful as we all have associations with Jesus and Christianity, there's something toxic about this teaching of an atonement. We're all broken, so we need a savior figure to make us whole. What if we're just whole to begin with? But instead, you're now living this beautiful life, always feeling broken and flawed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was very well said. And
Yeah.
Thank you. Your knowledge really, Crystal said this from the first time she listened to Mormon stories. She said that you're brilliant, and you really are.
Well, back to your story. So this marriage, you begin, again, you're just on the shame wheel, right? And as a priesthood holder in a patriarchy, which is also messed up, the wife's looking to the husband to be the worthy priesthood holder, and you're starting off just flawed and soiled and broken spiritually, right?
We wanted to be righteous. I mean, like our second date, we went to the temple and did an endowment session. I mean, that's what we did. We wanted to be good. We wanted to be worthy. And it's, John, if we're being honest, let me say my opinion. I would bet that over 50% of active Mormons did stuff before they got married. I know people, and I know what drives them. And the fact, listen, at least I got to go get it out. These people are living hell. I know how they're feeling because I spent my mission living in literal hell, thinking God was unhappy with me. Any man that's in a leadership position, John, and he's hiding stuff, you are as sick as your secrets. And these guys, they're human, and it doesn't make them bad people, John. It doesn't make them bad people. Some of them don't feel like we need to talk about later about when I told Crystal just recently that I viewed pornography.
No, we'll get there. Let's not talk now.
I was just saying that these guys, what they did, it doesn't necessarily make them bad people, but they have their hands tied, John. I felt I couldn't be honest to go on that mission, and so I lied. An honest, brutally honest person. I'm an open book, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm really an honest person. But when you tie someone's hands up and you back them in a corner and you basically don't give them the option, good people will lie.
Yeah. Just by the way, my understanding is that Utah has one of the highest rates of sex abuse and child abuse in the country.
Top three
per capita.
Top three in every category.
Yeah.
And how can it not be that this culture of shame and guilt and oppression, right?
Yeah.
And literally teaching people to lie.
Yeah.
And demonizing sex and making sex perverted and hyper focusing on sex. How can that not contribute to a culture that would lead to higher rates of sexual abuse of children?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, keep going. Sorry.
We never felt like we really fit in. Those years, we tried so hard to serve. If we were Sunday school teachers, I mean, we were devoted. We were really trying everything, and her especially. I mean, Crystal, bless her heart, she gave everything to her callings, and she tried to be the perfect mom and do all the family home evenings. And I mean, you were a stalwart. Like, you wore yourself out. Crystal wore herself out trying to be that perfect mom that did every Mormon thing exact to the T. And sometimes I felt, Crystal, like I was unworthy of you. Sometimes I felt like you were better than me. I actually believed that. I believed you were better than me. And sometimes, like, if I saw her reading her scriptures, I would say, I would have a feeling inside of me that, because I never enjoyed reading scriptures, I didn't like it. It never really appealed to me. That kind of language, that ancient, archaic way of talking, I don't like it. I never enjoyed it. And so I would rather read like modern day talks and stuff. But Crystal, I mean, she was devout. She did everything to the T for all those years. And sometimes I would think she's just trying to be better than me. She's just trying to show me up. She's reading her scriptures in front of me just to make me feel bad. And it wasn't the case. She was just trying to do what was asked of us.
So, Crystal, let me ask. So you start your marriage off, number one, with this disfellowshipment and this sense of shame and the public shaming of you having to get married outside the temple. And then Sean receives the disciplinary council punishments. Tell me in your mindset how that set up your early marriage in terms of power, in terms of perception, worthiness, your goals and aspirations. What's going through your mind as all this is happening, and then you're starting to, start a family?
Yeah. I don't think in the beginning I really had.
We were overwhelmed with having. We had children early.
Yeah, right away we started having kids, and I don't think I ever thought, is he doing his part as the patriarch of the home? That came later, probably more like 10 years into the marriage, and I started as we had all of our kids, and I felt like, okay, we have our family now. We need to be doing our part as parents to raise these kids as good, worthy Mormons. So I started to become a little more proactive about our role, because when you're having babies, I don't think you're really thinking much about family home evenings and getting to church every Sunday.
Just survival mode.
Yeah. So now I'm like, okay, we got our kids, and let's, what can we do to make sure that we are checking off all the boxes?
But I was trying early on. I was making such an effort, right? I was really trying. And I think the breaking point for me, the tipping point, was that temple worker calling.
Oh, yeah.
And that just...
But keep talking. So first is the kids, but then what?
Then, so I started having these high expectations. Suddenly I started realizing, wait a minute, he's not being that patriarch of the home that I had envisioned, when we first got married. And like I said, I hadn't really thought much about it until this point, and I wanted him to be more diligent about making sure we get to church every Sunday, because we would miss it, and it was just kind of like, should we go today? Like, let's go boating instead, So we had we went for the most part, but we weren't afraid to be like, let's just skip it today and go boating.
The first few years we never did.
Yeah, we really.
It wasn't until I was supposedly called as a temple worker.
I think that really.
That was critical.
Yeah, that really affected you. It was about 5 years into our marriage, I think. Or maybe, was it about 5 years or 5 years
Okay,
ago?
so you're saying early on you weren't...
No, it was like 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Early on you weren't shaming him or seeing him as inferior. You were just trying to raise the kids and survive.
I felt like we were spiritual and we were doing our best. So.
And I was working hard at it too.
Yeah.
But I think what this might reflect is, even if Crystal's super happy with you or just overwhelmed with life, all that baggage of shame and of judgment is probably leaving you continually feeling unworthy, right?
Always.
So even a look from her could be interpreted by you as something, even if it's not meant that way.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about that calling? Because that's kind of like that happened before.
I was called into the bishop. It was about 3 years after we got married, and I was called into the bishop, and he said exactly, Sean, the Lord has called you to be a temple worker. And I literally went like this, John. Really? And he said, yes. And John, I think I was just like overwhelmed. I didn't cry. I didn't used to cry. But I remember going home, John, and I was on cloud 9. And I felt so proud.
He's getting out 15 years of tears that he's been holding in.
I went home, and I was so excited to go into my house and to find Crystal and to say, I'm a temple worker. I was so happy. And I finally thought that God knew me and that I was finally forgiven for all the things I'd done and for the lie. And...
because surely God wouldn't call you to the holy place.
I mean, to me, a temple worker, me, a temple worker was as big as it got for me. I mean, I thought, wow, like, this is amazing.
And was this Draper?
Yeah.
So the Draper Temple had been built?
No? Not yet.
West Jordan?
I would have been at the
South Jordan.
Whatever it is.
South Jordan, isn't it?
West, yeah. Okay.
Oh, is it West
South Jordan? Jordan River, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I know, because I've been in, we got sealed there.
Yeah.
About I told everyone, John. I told everyone. I was so excited. I just felt redeemed. And then a few days later, I got a call that I needed to come back into the bishop. So put on my suit, And I went back into the bishop, and he said, Sean, you know what? And you got to consider, at first he said, the Lord has called you. That's how it was put to me. And then he called me back in and he said, Sean, your mother-in-law and your father-in-law, they're the ones that recommended that you be a temple worker. And I said, oh, wasn't aware of that. And then he said, I just found out that you can't be a temple worker because you were divorced in the last 5 years and you're on a probation. And John, this. Yeah,
that really affected your testimony.
It did.
What did that do?
Well, for one, I thought the Lord called me. What happened? Not only did the Lord not call me, I was recommended. And not only did the Lord not call me.
And he only told you that when you had to explain why it was a mistake.
Never mind.
He didn't tell you, right?
I'm sorry. It's just not funny to me. I hate it.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's really, really a bad part of my history. And you're right, Crystal. And 2020, hindsight is 2020. And
so you were upset because you thought it was called of God. What else?
And because of the fact that because of your marriage that didn't work out?
John, it was at that point I realized that there's no redemption. I did my time, John. I went through that counsel. It was humiliating. And at that time, I realized that the atonement didn't work for me. I wasn't forgiven. And I realized that I would have a notch or a mark on my record for the rest of my life. And that I was going to pay a price for that throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
So what did you conclude from that?
I just started to get jaded.
I think after that, I think I could tell he just had kind of more of a negative attitude about things. And it started to really bug me. I would get really annoyed if he ever said anything critical about the church or one of the leaders. Even if he said, I hate the way that his voice sounds. I'd be like,
Well, I didn't like the spiritual voices in church. I don't agree with that. I don't like how a person can talk one way. It's no different than a news anchor. A news anchor, are they really going to get up? Hey, everybody, now we're going to go to the bathroom and we're going to eat our cereal. How come the spiritual voice is employed? I never liked it. It didn't make sense to me. And there's a whole host of cultural things that they do, that Mormons do, that never added up to me. And I would mention them to Crystal, and she would get very, oh man.
You are not allowed to say anything.
We fought.
Yeah, if you even said that was a really boring talk from a general conference, I'd be like, how could you say that? You can't.
Or if the church would come down on gays, I would speak up about it. Or, there was all kinds of issues that I would speak up about, all these issues all the time. And it got to the point where I think at one point we got in such a big fight, biggest of our marriage.
5 years ago.
I thought we were going to get divorced. I left. And the reason I left was because I thought, I'm not what she wants. I'm not what she dreamed of. And I left and I went to my cabin and I stayed there. I think it was 3 days up there. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was up there and I was just thinking, I can't be myself. I can't be who I am. And I remember I got a call from my dad. He said, what are you doing? I told him, because I tell my parents everything my whole life. And he said, Sean, listen to me. He said, he basically said, is it worth losing your marriage over? And I decided it wasn't. And so I began to stuff everything down. I came home and I began to do my very best to bury every critical feeling, everything that was out of alignment. Anytime I didn't agree with what was done, I would try bear it. Keep in mind, we had many fights about religion, but that one was the tipping point. That one was where I finally realized this could end in divorce.